One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Okay, so imagine a world where you can remember everything. Every single detail, every aspect of something you just seen or heard. Brilliant. You could, for instance, pass all your classes easily, finally remember the date of your wedding anniversary, or maybe even finish a sentence of Marcel Proust and remember the beginning of it. It sounds pretty cool, but is it really? What if you have to explain a movie you just saw to your friends, and you remember every sequence of each scene of it? If it's an hour-and-a-half movie, it's going to take you an hour and a half to explain, and your friends are going to be bored to death before they even start to understand the story. And what about a 3-week trip to Bali? It's a nightmare. So to be able to make a resume, to have a critical judgment, and most important, to have an idea, you need to forget. Forget part of what you heard. An idea is a simplification of the world in front of us. And you have to focus on what's really important and what your goal is. When I started my job as an illustrator and a graphic facilitator, I had this very problem. How can I make people remember complicated speeches or graph without saying, and by saying I mean drawing, everything? I had no choice but to adapt. It is physically impossible for me to draw each comma or each number of a graph. So I looked into the history of my country, Belgium. And I found out that my comic book artist ancestors, which my dad is part of them, so he probably won't like that, sorry, Dad, were using something called ellipsis. An ellipsis is when you leave out part of a story. Well, it can be used to condense time, or as a stylistic method for the people to fill in with their imagination. Ernest Hemingway called that the iceberg theory that he developed while he was working in a newspaper as a journalist and had really little time to write articles. Let me give you an example. A few years ago, I was invited to draw live in a pharmaceutical speech, and of course, you can guess it's not my field of preference. And after a few minutes, a Japanese chemist started talking about the importance of globalization in regulation of the new drugs, blah, 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 blah. Something crazy. And I started to melt down my podium in front of 200 people. And then I forgot part of what he said. And I simplified, and I used ellipsis. And by doing that, it made it look like I was an expert. It was something simple. Globalization, drug regulation, approval. And it worked. Since I have no choice but to forget, I choose to go even further and forget even more. With the style of drawings that I use, I simplify twice. First, I simplify the story. And then I simplify my mental image of it, to strip down everything that's not important and to be left out with what's essential. Let me give you an example. This is a cowboy, a pretty good-looking one. And for most of the people, this is still a cowboy. So of course, Giraud have a much better memory than I do, and more talent, but I'm not really sure he would win a game of Pictionary. So in the collective unconscious, a cowboy is a guy with a cowboy hat, just as a house is 3 squares with a triangle on top. You don't have to be Giraud or Picasso to be understood with drawings. It's like a new language made of signs instead of letters. Think about the Egyptians. Thousands of years ago, they used hieroglyphs. It was a mix between text and pictograms. It's learning a new international language made of squares, circles, and lines. And when I say international, I mean it. Like 2 weeks ago, I was working in China, and after a weekend in Shanghai, I came back to my hotel late at night and couldn't tell the guy that I wanted my luggage that was in the storage room. I tried everything I could. Talked with my hand, in English, of course. I did my charade move. Nothing worked. Until I took a piece of paper and a pen, and I drew this. And 5 minutes later, I was inside my room with my luggage. So what I do is, I love what I do. I do drawings, and that's what I do for a living, so that's what I use. But you can use those principles with pretty much everything. Every idea you have, every concept, every medium you want to use. And you already use that in your day-to-day life, ellipsis and simplification. For instance, when you use emojis on your smartphone, or when you write down kids on a to-do list. Even when you say you don't like fish. You don't like the simplification you made of a fish. Well, it's impossible for you to know them all. And I can assure you that some of them are quite nice, especially this one. So to wrap it up, I won't help you find that great idea. But I'm sure that if you remember to forget, to simplify, and to use ellipsis, you're going to be able to explain it to a lot of people and transform that idea into a great idea. Thank you very much.